Hello, sports card collectors and investors. Thanks for joining me again for another episode. I'm excited to talk today about just kind of some big picture stuff that I was thinking about last night. I wanted to get some feedback from you guys too, because you kind of get, both sides of the argument. There are a lot of people, that aren't really sure, if this sports card, environment is going to last. If this is just kind of a fluke, if it's, I've heard all of it from, this is the junk wax era all over again. These people are fly by night. Some people are going to come in, and then they're going to go for something else. So, and I think there's some validity to those arguments. I don't have conviction one way or the other as far as, there's no real right or wrong to me. It's more about, just, I think, opening up that discussion. And this thing is kind of unwinding every day. We don't really know. There's so many outside variables that we have no idea about. I mean, just in particular, one thing that I was looking at as I was doing some research last night, back in 2018, there was a study, and there was a tech company that had come out with an estimate on the sports memorabilia annual industry, what it is sales-wise annually, trying to gauge how big the market is. And when we talk about sports memorabilia, they're also lumping in sports cards as part of that. So we're talking about, not just cards, but helmets and jerseys and all the rest of it that might be signed or, so it was kind of an all-encompassing study, and they estimated it right about $5 billion a year. But, there's so many, and a lot of what I read was, they're just having a hard time. It's very hard to quantify all the sales because, most of it's done online. And then, of course, you have a lot of sales that might happen at card shows. It's, they're cash sales, or they're happening, between friends, between colleagues. People, they are trading cards, so people are trading and buying and selling. So it's extremely difficult, I think, to quantify, how big the market is and also just how big it can be. I mean, I'm just thinking, as I hear that 2018, as of 2018, it was at $5 billion a year. What's it going to look like at, what are those numbers in 2019 and 2020? Because from all accounts, it seems as though, and I don't have hard data on it, but it seems as though transaction volume is quite a bit higher in 2019 and 20 than it was in 18. So maybe that was in 18, it was just kind of ramping up. I also read that as of 2017, that they quantified the industry at about 200 million a year, roughly. So sales had dropped so much as of 2017. I mean, it was hurting, and that's compared to when they were going back and looking at the early 90s during the junk wax era. They were talking about the industry being about $1 billion, and of course, it's 90s money, inflation, and everything else. You have to factor that in, but they were quantifying it at about $1 billion, and that was really the heyday of sports cards before, I would say, today was that junk wax era in terms of just sales, overall sales. So it kind of gets you thinking. It's like, and I know that if we're looking at from everything that I've heard and read about online, sports cards, especially rare ones, held value pretty well, even through the financial recession, even through 2008. On the back of 2008, when stocks crumbled, real estate crumbled, sports cards, of course, pricing took a hit, but it wasn't like, rare sports cards just went down and they were 20% of their value, across the board. That's not, from all accounts, from the research that I've seen and from what I've heard through forums, that didn't happen to people that did have those, those more rare cards. Now, maybe on very common things, that's the case, but I don't have any hard data on it. But what does this mean? And part of the reason why I'm talking about this is because, as we're looking at cards now and we're looking at players, we're looking at, especially, Michael Jordan's really hot right now, so everyone's looking at, late 90s and early 2000s. And they're looking at especially cards, there's 2012 being the first year of Prism. That's a hot set. So now everyone's looking at 2012 Prism. And it makes sense because, okay, so that was the first set of Prism. And then of course the print runs, I'm assuming they were very low, especially compared to what they are today. And even today, the print runs are not expected to be near what they were back in the junk wax era. So to me, there's probably a lot of value. I mean, if you're looking at down the line, 5 years, 10 years down the line, let's say that sports cards just kind of stay hot. Maybe it's not this hot, but it's still fairly hot. Demand stays high, and you have print runs that kind of increase, and companies are trying to make money off of it. So maybe you have some different sets that come into play, and so on and so forth. I think what's interesting to look at is, well, what about those sets that that are between 2008 and 2018? Because obviously, if in 2017 they were projecting card sales at $200 million, and they were projecting that as being a fraction of what it could be, or of what it had been in the past, and that's as of 2017, then the assumption for me, I'm assuming then that the print runs leading up to 2017, and we do know this. I mean, we do know when we're talking about Giannis rookie cards and things, part of what people will say is, well, you can't compare a Giannis Prism rookie card to a Luka Doncic rookie card, because there's a lot more Luka rookie cards being printed now than Giannis, back during his rookie year. So, and that's a valid argument. I completely understand where people are coming from with that. And of course, there's other variables to consider. But if we're just talking about print runs, Giannis's rookie was during a time when the sports card market in general was not hot. People weren't out buying cards. I watched a YouTube video the other day. It was great. It was another channel, and he was talking about how he got Giannis rookie cards for $20, $30, and he had sold them, so he didn't keep them. He wishing he had, of course, if he had them now, it would be dramatically more expensive. But just kind of showing you that back then in that 2012 to 2015 Prism, 16, 17, those Prism products, there just wasn't much demand, or just not enough to where, that there was very much, the print runs were low and there wasn't as much demand. Now we're all kind of looking back on those cards, and you have to assume that there's some pretty good value in there, just because of the lower print runs. And we are seeing, of course, sales are picking up, transactions are picking up across the board, especially on that 2012 Prism set, because it's first Prism. Same thing for, I believe it's 2016 Optic or 17 Optic being the first Optic set. So you're seeing all those things happen, but it just kind of, it made me think, like, man, there's, we're always trying to look at where the value lies. And to me, that just seems like kind of a no-brainer. It's another reason why I jump on kind of those older basketball sets that were pre-junk wax era. So we kind of really hit that. I would say we started at 89-90 Hoops would be a set that you can still find, pretty easy to find packs of those from what I've seen. But then once you get into 90-91 Fleer, 91, then it's very common, 90-91 Skybox. But what I'm talking about is basketball sets that were 88 Fleer and before. Of course, 86 Fleer is an extremely expensive set because it's the iconic set. All the Hall of Fame rookie cards make sense. But those, I think 87, 88 Fleer, because of that, those are ones where if you're going to go to try and find packs of those, just looking off eBay. Now, granted, maybe they're in a different spot that I'm not finding them, but when I go on eBay to look for those packs, the ones that are available, assuming they're not resealed or messed with, are very expensive. So for me, that's a sign of, okay, there's some scarcity there, that there could be some value there for those cards. So anyway, I'm looking at this kind of the same way. As bottom line is, I think there's value from 2009, from that financial collapse, up through 2017, just because I think the card market as a whole was struggling. And so they weren't printing a million cards, especially of those sets, Prism and Optic and those sorts of sets, because there just wasn't demand for it. And now that demand is kind of rushing back into the market. Something else that's kind of a key point, that I wanted to bring up is, a lot of folks have said, we do have a lot of kind of the sports bettors and the daily fantasy players. They don't have anywhere to put their money, and they're looking for somewhere to enjoy sports. There's no sports on TV, so we're all just struggling, and that's brought everybody back into sports cards. That's brought some of us back into sports cards. And so I guess the question is will those people, what percentage of those people that come over from sports betting, and daily fantasy sports, they might be here to stay. They might say, man, I love the sports card thing. I'm not going to go back and spend my money in daily fantasy, or not as much, or I'm going to split it up, or however it's going to go. And so that'll be kind of interesting too moving forward, because just like with me, I collected cards. I love collecting cards back in the late 80s, 90s. I collected a ton of cards for years and years as a kid, and I did comic books as well. I actually came back into this on the comic book side first, and in part because I was like, sports cards, like who's really doing, and this was 2 years ago, I was thinking like, who's buying those? Like, is that going to be worth, are they going to move at all? Are they going to, is it worth getting back into it? And then I began to see that with comic books, there was some flipping opportunities, there was some opportunities there, and it was fun. And then I realized that, about a year and a half ago, that sports cards did have those opportunities. And so it kind of got me back in. But how many more people are there like me that are sitting out there and they're kind of on the sidelines, but they haven't jumped in yet because they just haven't read enough about it. But now we've got ESPN and Sports Illustrated articles talking about the industry in general. So you're kind of, is this going to become more mainstream? How big can it get? It's intriguing. I mean, the art industry, the global art industry, is a $60 billion a year industry. And I know, maybe that's not an apples to apples comparison, but that's a collectible investment, fine art. And so, can sports cards become a $50 billion a year industry? I don't know about that. I would probably pump the brakes, but does it really need to be? And do we even want it to be? So it'll be really interesting to kind of just see how this thing plays out. But it does seem that there has just been a lot of, movement from different areas, to sports card investing. And so, I'm excited to see, where it goes from here. Guys, thanks very much for joining me again. I know I was kind of ranting and rambling, but this is more to open up discussion. I just want to hear, I also want to hear from you all. Please subscribe, comment below. There's no right or wrong answer to this. There's no experts in this game. I mean, we're all just kind of riding this roller coaster, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. So anyway, I want to hear what you've got to say, and thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate it, and we will see you again soon. Thanks, guys.